I'm Vasilios Gletsos of Wonder Camera Beer Manufacturer, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest is Tim Grom. Sorry, I'm gonna fuck it. I knew somebody named Gormley, so I'm gonna fuck it up. Okay,
I hear
my
it all the time.
my guest is Tim Gormley of Burial Beer, and he is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into the topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first this message.
Unlock iced tea flavor with First Tea's Instant Black Tea. Quick dissolving and easy to dose, Instant Black Tea makes it convenient to create that refreshing iced tea flavor. Use Instant Black Tea with lemon, peach, or raspberry for a line of fruity iced tea beers or hard teas. Try it with botanicals like lemon myrtle, lemon balm, and lemongrass. Email info@firsttea, that's FIRSDTEA.com to find out more.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Ironheart Canning is the quality leader in mobile canning and much more. With a decade of packaging experience, Ironheart is your turnkey solution for all your canning needs. Ironheart has no minimums on their mobile service, great supply chain quality control like no other, as well as technical support programs. Need canning materials? Ironheart has you covered with cans by the pallet or the trailer load, Pactex case trays, and can ends as well. Ironheart Canning. You have the capability because Ironheart can do it for you. Visit them at ironheartcanning.com or email info@ironheartcanning.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropmaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success at malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Tim Gormley is co-founder, co-owner of Burial Beer Company in Asheville, North Carolina. After serving as head brewer for the first 5 years, he shifted to project manager and later interim general manager of the forestry camp. In late 2020, he took the role of director of development, where he focused on the expansion of Burial Beer's product and experience offerings outside of craft beer. His current title has been focused to director of visuals, which is Burial's wine, cider, and aperitif brand. Tim, welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hey man, so great to hear from you. So great to see you. It's been a while. And
Yeah,
man, thank you so much for thinking of me for this. It's such a joy.
Of course, there's so many things I'd love to talk to you about, and hopefully we'll hit on a few of them today.
Yeah.
And so good to hear from you too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I always learn something whenever I come into contact with you and check out what Burial's up to. There's always some avenue of a passionate depth of something that I get to glean from my experiences with you. And I was really hoping that that's something we can bring to the audience of All About Beer today.
Yeah, dude, thank you. That's means a lot to me coming from you. You're such a huge inspiration for me too. I honestly yeah, I always love linking up with you and hearing your stories and following along on social media from afar. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh yeah, what a pleasure and what an honor. Thank you. I wanted to, yeah, I would definitely like to focus today on creativity, aesthetics, storytelling, some of the things that I feel like you guys do really well and beautifully. And I was kind of hoping that maybe you could start out, if you don't mind, talking about the different venues that you guys have at Burial, what you try to do with each one of them, how aesthetics maybe tie into one place versus another place, or whether you think it's more an overarching aesthetic. So, do you kind of get that? What I mean?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, a big question. But yeah, I'll try to touch on all those little elements. I mean, so we started off a little over 10 years ago. We got really lucky. We found this really cool kind of industrial building in what is now known as the South Slope neighborhood, though I feel like when I first moved to Asheville, um, that wasn't really part of the lexicon. No one really had a name for the neighborhood that I can recall because there wasn't much reason to go there. Green Man did have a spot right nearby, and there was a really cool dive bar called the Prospect there, but and both are still there, but those are about the only things that were there initially, and it just felt like a really great open canvas for us. And that spot remains the kind of like mothership, if you will,
Yeah.
uh, the OG spot, that so much of our kind of soul is attached to, if you will. Um,
Did you feel like when you moved into that spot, like, I mean, as you know, starting out, starting your own brewing company with your co-founders, you start to develop what you think of as an aesthetic, what kind of place you want it to be, how you want to be different than what's around you, or fit in, or how were you like conceiving of the aesthetics of that early on? Or sometimes it can be just catch as catch can. This is cool, that's cool, and all of a sudden you got a place. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah, so I think it's worth noting that Doug and Jess Reese are my business partners and also, great longtime friends. We we had taken a trip in 2010 to mostly to Belgium, but we did some kind of day trips to Germany and France and the Netherlands. And in a lot of ways, that trip was kind of like an intentional journey of discovery and like kind of seeking inspiration. And, I had already kind of fallen in love with Saison, more than anything, but kind of Belgian beer in general, kind of more so from a flavor standpoint, I guess, and a little bit from like a storyline, but it wasn't until going there that and witnessing those just I guess the beer culture there and the way that beer is kind of revered in a lot of ways there and presented in beautiful ways. And we got to go to um Teeterie and see like a fairly authentic farmhouse style brewery, and kind of came back to Asheville, sorry, we weren't in Asheville yet at the time, but came back to the States, and we were just kind of collectively enamored by the concept of a farmhouse brewery. Um, but we also kind of realized that we weren't farmers and we probably were never going to be farmers. And so um, we kind of initially were looking for something that was a little bit more like rural, maybe had a little bit of land to it, maybe had a barn on the property, like that was kind of what we were looking for initially. And the more we dove into that and kind of started to realize the realities of that and needing to brew off of a well, and how do we get like, big 18 wheelers in here to unload grain or whatever, like we just kind of started to realize that it maybe uh, wasn't going to be as realistic, I guess, or as easy for us to kind of get off the ground. So anyway, we kind of stumbled upon this place in the South Slope. It had a lot of character to it. I think it used to be like a radiator repair shop or something like that. And then the guy who was that we rented from was a very artistic, creative guy, and he had created this like really interesting, almost like butterfly garden in the backyard. And there was an artist that was renting one of the units and had it as a studio. And so it felt like a pretty cool kind of communal base there. But in a lot of ways, the kind of aesthetic that came together was more so just kind of based off of what the space dictated, I guess you could say. And, we tried to bring some of that farmhouse vibe that inspired us to the space in small ways. Like we were kind of hanging tools, various like farming tools and whatnot on the walls. It had this really cool kind of like rusted metal roof thing, which kind of fit in pretty well. It almost had like a barn-like vibe to it. Excuse me. But in another way, or something that we've talked about a lot is like one of the coolest things about dive bars is like they kind of come together through the years, and as people contribute in different ways, as regulars come in and drop things off, as the owners or bartenders collect various trinkets and decor, it just kind of grows and evolves very organically in a way that's super cool. And so we were kind of like leaning into that in a lot of ways, and so it was pretty stark on the early days, and then it just kind of slowly came together. Like the one of the things that we're kind of quasi famous for is this like velvet painting of Tom Selleck, which has later turned into this really goofy mural on the outside of the building. But
Yeah,
so many people have asked me the story about that, and it was literally like one of the very first people that worked for us as a bartender had worked at another brewery up the hill that went out of business, and they had this velvet painting in the brewery, and he was like, I don't want this thing to be lost, like, do y'all want to put it up in barrel? And we were all like, hell yeah, that thing's amazing.
that's
So that's
awesome.
just like one example, of like kind of how it slowly evolved. And
Yeah, I love
and
that aspect and how things can start to take on a sense of their own personal history that way, and can be almost like little talismans to go in one direction or another with the basically with the history of the place, and
Right.
they take on significance, and even for everybody there who might not be a regular, it's a subject of curiosity, and then the longer, the more you come back, it's part of the surroundings, and you're part of the surroundings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I love the word curiosity, that you said. It's such a it's such a ethos, I guess, that we have just in so many different capacities. But yeah, I mean, I love that concept of just like there develops this really cool history and so many stories. Like every kind of thing in the place has a little story to it, and if people inquire with the right person, they'll get a they'll get a good story about it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
love.
Yeah, and but you have moved on to some other places, I mean, opened additional locations and things as well. When I first met you, I came down and visited 2019 or something like that, I think, and you had recently opened Forestry Camp. Is that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah. Your timeline is correct. Yeah. So as you kind of mentioned in my bio, um, a little bit of backstory on Forestry Camp. We basically, when we were first looking for properties for burial, my partner Doug had looked at the forestry camp spot, and it was really cool. It had a lot of character to it, had a lot of potential, but at that time it was just like way bigger than what we wanted, or what we could afford. And lo and behold, several years later after opening, when we were kind of looking to expand our production, the space was still available, and we were able to acquire it at that point. And it's just a incredibly compelling spot. It's only 2 miles away from our original location on the South Slope. It's in what we call the Biltmore Village, which is kind of the neighborhood that surrounds the Biltmore Estate, which is just a very historically important, and a big tourist destination in Asheville. Um, it was built by the U.S. government back in I think the early 30s. It was part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was a FDR program, kind of like a post-depression program. And it was a program that existed all over the US, and it was, pretty tied to like the Forestry Service. And it was just a period in American history where a lot of national parks were being created, a lot of preservation was
Yeah.
put
Yeah,
into
not just that,
form.
but a lot of like national artworks, like the Works Progress Administration, just like
Right,
so many beautiful pieces of natural and artistic beauty as well, just like all the murals and sculptures and photography and everything else that was done around that era to sort of the
right,
full recovery. A beautiful, beautiful time for productivity.
right. I know. Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's just a really cool property. I think it's 2 or 3 acres, I forget. And it has 6 buildings on the property. And we um we kind of had this vision of what all the buildings could be, but and kind of we basically approached the build out in 3 sections. And it was, the first priority was getting the building that we foresaw as being like the production brewery, the perfect building for that. So we got the production brewery up and running first, and then we had, built some kind of like barrel houses and kind of like a office building. And then the third and final stage of the build out was, what we basically just call, forestry camp, or Burial Beers Forestry Camp, which was the original name that it was called way back in the day. We just kept that name, but the building that we thought kind of had the most character of all of them, they called it the fire cache back in the day when it was used by the government. We decided to turn that into like a tap room and restaurant. And so, it's just like, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's
I
just
mean,
an,
I think if you like, for me, I grew up part of my teenage years were growing up just north of the Adirondack Park,
okay.
and it just definitely has it definitely channels that like sort of park ranger station aesthetic with a lot of deep wood, very like utilitarian kind of build to it. It's a beautiful spot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's like it's it's all made out of this huge pine timber, like big, massive beams, and the construction of it is really unique with like these steel kind of like threaded uh, beams that essentially kind of connect everything together. It
Right.
had all these like cubby holes. So it's like all wood cubby holes that covered almost every wall in the building, which I guess they used for various kind of storage of things, or probably some of the personal effects of the guys that worked there at the time. But anyway, I was just feeling very inspired by the space, and I had a
Absolutely.
lot of ideas of like how it could be, what the aesthetic of the thing could be, what the service model could be. And so anyway, I kind of had basically like reached out to Doug and Jess, and I was like, hey, I'm feeling super inspired by this. Like, I know that we're kind of struggling to focus on this, any one of us. And so, like, I'm kind of raising my hand here. Like, I would love to really focus in on this, help get it open, be the project manager, work with the architects, work with the contractors, and kind of see this through fruition and help, build the initial team and the beverage program and the food program and all that stuff. So that was a thing that I pretty much had done throughout the course of all of 2019, and we got the place open in September of 2019. So I think that, well, I guess it's worth noting that one of the initial kind of visions for the beverage program was that we were not trying to make another tap room. And we were kind of making all these moves with like how we named it and how we listed it on the internet and how we talked about it. And we were kind of purposefully trying to tell people like, hey, this isn't another tap room. This is like an experience of itself. And it's kind of like a gastro pub. And we wanted there to be, we had a pretty large draft list or draft amount of things that we could have on draft at any one time, but we only ever really had like 3 or 4 burial offerings on. In the early days, we were really leaning into, hey, we want to serve beers and wines from people that we know personally, that we really admire, that and by doing so we can really like tell their story to the best of our ability. And so we can kind of like take the beer bar concept, but have it be a little bit more intimate, because we're like literally involved in making this stuff ourselves, and that we're connected with the people that do it by our side. And so I think that we had basically a Wonder Camera like feature, I believe it was, and we had a bunch of your beers on. And so I think that was the first time that we really got to like, sit down and have a beer together and get to know each other. And that was a really magical moment.
Yeah, that was so great. And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
So, and then you've opened like a concert space and you got like a wine bar. Maybe you could briefly mention what those projects are, and um, if there's a particular inspiration or vibe or goal that you're going for with each of those. I guess I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get an aesthetic.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I'm trying to understand through our conversation the different aesthetics that burial has, and like how you guys express yourself in your environments as well as your beverage offerings, and the way that inspiration takes you and how it manifests, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, I mean, I think kind of from like a timeline perspective, after forestry camp, we ended up opening a place in Raleigh, that's in a food hall. And so that's kind of a unique sort of situation from any other of our spots. And then we have one in Charlotte now as well. And it's kind of it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about, because when I first met Doug and Jess, they weren't really that into beer, mostly because they had prior to living in Seattle, where I met them, they had lived in New Orleans. And at the time, New Orleans really just didn't have much of a craft beer culture. They were kind of much more into wine when I first met them. But one of the things that they were always really passionate about was just kind of like the experience of going to a bar or to a brewery or to a winery. And I think just the word experience is like so core to the way we think of things. Our mission statement is essentially to create immersive experiences. And so, the beverages that we make, of course, are a very huge part of what our business is. But we think of it in a much broader sense than that. And our beers and our wines and our ciders and all the beverages that we make kind of ultimately just fit into, they're like these accents to a life experience. And so, Doug often says, like, the thing that he was most excited about when we started the business was to create spaces and experiences and like take inspiration from specific places and experiences that we've had in our lives and our travels that were really impactful. And so our approach with these other tap rooms has often been, we want them to each kind of have their own distinct personality, and um, we want them to kind of represent like just another side of our interests, I guess you could say. And so it's interesting because sometimes we've gotten like a little bit of slack about this, or like sometimes we see negative reviews of our spaces. Sometimes it's almost like you can tell that people are almost like laughing in when they're writing the review. Like, I can't believe that this is like, how is this a burial spot? It looks nothing like what their original spot was, or it's like I have this certain expectation that burial's this kind of like
Yeah.
metal brewery, right? And like the tap room, the Charlotte tap room, especially if you're like on the roof deck, it looks almost like a tropical, there's like turquoise and coral stuff. It's
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
it's the least metal thing that you would ever imagine, and um
Well, that's so great. I really appreciate that because it almost sounds to me like you're taking the actual location and what, looking at the potential of what it could be and sort of trying to bring that out rather than just kind of, throwing down some kind of astroturfy kind of you know
right.
here's the the big banners that we hang in all our places or whatever else it is,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
really,
Yeah,
I
I
really
think that it's always like interesting. I mean, of course I get it from like a marketing branding perspective, like there is some validity to this idea of being like, hey, build a brand, make it recognizable, make it so that when people see a thing on the shelf, they know immediately that it's burial, right? And like,
yeah,
I get that. I know the value of that, of course, but I also know that like as humans, we're all like, very eclectic people. We have so many different things that inspire us. Um, and I'm somebody that can equally love going to like a really shitty dive bar or going to like a Michelin star restaurant. They're both wildly different experiences, but they're both really intriguing in their own ways. And so our thing was just kind of like, hey, let's just show this other side of a personality, or like let's do this thing that's kind of like it feels right, it feels cool, it feels interesting. It's maybe there's not anything quite like it in the area. And let's build an experience around that. And so that's kind of been our thing, and it is pretty eclectic, but it definitely keeps it really fun. I mean, just in the same way that as brewers, we often talk about like it can be somewhat challenging if you're going to work and having to kind of brew the same thing or the same handful of
oh,
beer all the time. You want to like keep it interesting for yourself. And so we
for
do
sure.
that for spaces too.
Absolutely. I actually that's kind of another subject I wanted to talk with you about. And we're just about at the halfway point. That flew really fast for me. So but I'm gonna go ahead and read this here. So we're gonna take a short break for this message and come right back for more of this conversation with Tim Gormley of Burial Beer.
Not your grandma's tea bag. First Tea's instant black tea unlocks a world of flavor possibilities for your beers and hard teas. Ditch the messy loose leaf. Instant black tea is easy to use and dissolves instantly. Every batch is perfect with their standardized instant tea. Consistent results with no more guesswork on steeping times. Email info@firsttea, that's FIRSDTEA.com to get instant teas and other botanicals for your next brew project.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropmaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success at malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.
Welcome back. So just as that break happened, you started talking about the sort of repetition, which is kind of the lifeblood of a lot of brewing work. You're brewing from the same recipe every day, which is great. And being able to hit those marks and exercise that degree of precision and getting the gratification from doing it, hitting it hard, doing it every day. There's a certain gratification of that, but also and that's definitely like the work of the craftsman. But I guess I wanted to try and, since a lot of your spaces are these immersive experiences and you're teasing out this what you want to express about your experience of the world, and of beer and everything else, I wanted to sort of go talk about the stuff that's a little less straightforward, the sort of beverages that you go into with more questions necessarily than recipes and answers, and maybe talk about some of those a little bit. So you have, aside from your brewing, you also have cider, you also do wine, you also do aperitifs. I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit um, about those projects, where you like source stuff from, how you construct flavors in those, how what's a wine idea, what's a cider idea, those kinds of things.
Right.
If that
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's probably worth just kind of quickly talking a little bit about like kind of my trajectory through beverage. When we first started Burial, like I said, I had kind of fallen in love with Saison, as a home brewer, as a beer drinker. Um, I still to this day would call it my favorite beer style. I think it's just so steeped in like romance.
Mm.
And so when I was the head brewer for the first 5 years, I was mostly focused on brewing at what I often refer to as the pub, or kind of like the initial um, the brew house that we had in the initial building. Even when we started the production brewery, I had stayed back and continued to brew at the pub, because at the end of the day, I was like, I'm most happy to go into work every day and to be like, staying curious and creating new things and experimenting. And so I had kind of I was really focused on brewing a lot of saisons. We basically had a fermenter dedicated just to the style, and I've always kind of viewed saison as being this really open canvas for experimentation and using lots of different ingredients and processes. And so I was messing with a lot of different ingredients. Like I was kind of almost priding myself at some point on just like what weird ingredients can I find
Mm.
and put into this beer and make it interesting. And so
Where were you finding a lot of the, were you go, was it, is there a foraging aspect? Were you like going to local herb farms, or were you like really like looking around the world in terms of where you could find things that you were interested in incorporating?
it was a little bit of all of that, honestly. I mean, I as much as I know that the like such a big part of the beauty of the style is like this sense of place and the terroir element, and so I certainly played into that at times when I could. And I'm not a huge forager, mostly
Mm.
just because I feel like I just don't have like enough experience to be super confident that what I'm harvesting is what I think it is. But we're fortunate in Asheville that there are a lot of really amazing people that do forage kind of professionally. And then at the time when I was brewing, sadly, this was kind of like a COVID closure, but there was this really cool business called New Appalachia that existed, where it's basically this guy who would go out into basically all these foragers, all these farmers from all of Western North Carolina, and kind of almost create like a cooperative, like single point of sale. So it was like I could reach out to this guy and be like, hey, do you have anything interesting going, like available right now? Or like, hey, I'm looking for this. Do you know of anybody in the area that is growing that? And so that was really, really helpful. But at the same time, I was also like kind of against the idea of limiting myself strictly to things that were available locally. So,
Yeah.
because inspiration can come from so many different places, and
Yeah.
if
I
you,
mean, you and I both share this love of vermouth and amari and things like
right,
that.
yeah.
Those those liqueur, I mean, when I first like conceived of them, I'm like, oh yeah, these Italian people are going out into the countryside and picking all this. But honestly, no, it comes from all over the world. Like they're getting
Right.
stuff from South America, from all parts of Africa. Like,
Yeah. No, it's such a good point. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes like some of those producers even kind of flaunt the fact that they have ingredients from like every continent of the world or whatever.
yeah.
Which is really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you kind of like beat me to the punch there, because I was gonna say essentially that like I came to discovering Amaro and Vermouth kind of from a strange angle, maybe different from most people, but it was kind of out of this. I was down this wormhole of like trying to discover all these unique ingredients that I could potentially use in Saison, like botanicals and flowers, and what's edible, what isn't edible, and I kind of came across these Amaro and Vermouth that clearly use all these really unique botanicals, and that kind of ended up feeling like this kind of source material in a way of being like, hey, what are they using in these? What is that thing like? How do I find that? Can I incorporate that? And that actually kind of ended up leading me to start to make some beers that, I was essentially calling like a Morrow ale, very Morrow inspired. And, my experience with like trying to sell those beers was mostly just that like people were super confused by it. I think I started to realize that like, in order for those types of Amaro and Vermouth to be like successful, they really need to be like pretty sweet. Um,
Yeah.
and so it kind of started to dawn on me, I guess, that like, yeah, maybe beer isn't like the perfect medium for this sort of approach.
Mm.
So when we started to make when we got our wine license and we were starting to make cider kind of initially, and then that turned into wine, it was like, okay, so doing a aromatized, a very botanical forward wine is a thing. It's not necessarily like part of the everyday American lexicon, but at least, like people understand what they're getting into when they buy one of those things.
Yeah.
And it just felt like such an exciting potential medium for me to take this like passion that I found in working with unique ingredients and applying it in kind of a more familiar way. So the
Mm.
aperitif program that we do under the Visuals brand is you know, probably the thing that I get the most personal enjoyment out of. It's also like one of the most challenging, I would say it's like the most challenging thing to formulate that I've ever done in my professional career, which is also like part of the joy for me. Like
Mhm.
it can be so challenging, but
What
when
are
it works,
the
it's
what are
great.
the particular challenges of it? How would you what'd you find most challenging about it?
I think that um I think that to some degree there's so much lore around like let's just say like Amaro specifically. There's so much kind of lore around it when you have these brands that have been around for in some cases hundreds of years, and kind of it started out as like medicine, and there's like this kind of medicinal element to it. Then there's like this element of having so many disparate ingredients, sometimes they'll advertise, yeah, this has like 100 botanicals in it, or
Yeah.
56 botanicals, and it's like, wow, how do you come up with a way to combine all these flavors into a thing that can be successful? And a lot of times, like as you consume these types of things with like your sensory hat on, it's like um it's kind of like the sum is great. The sum is greater than the parts, if you will, or it's kind of
Course,
like
yeah.
sometimes it's like all these things come together to create like a wholly new flavor. It's not like you can necessarily be like, oh yeah, I taste this, and this, and this.
Right.
It's kind of
Right.
more so like it's all coming together in one. And so it's like, and also, of
It
course, like,
becomes how starts to have almost more of a personality on its own because there's just so many different nuances and different things that just went into it that yeah, it's just its own thing, you know?
right. Yeah, exactly. And I think because also one of the most intriguing parts of the world of Amaro is that it's kind of notorious for how kind of secretive a lot of the producers are.
Sure.
So they might name a handful of the ingredients, but they're never going to give you like the full list. And so I kind of always loved that about it because it makes it a bit more mysterious, and it makes it feel like you can't
Yeah.
necessarily just like do enough research that you learn how to make it. It's like
Yeah.
all
It's
about
more,
trial
it's
and
almost
error.
like, yeah, we used to use crushed beetles, but we don't anymore. And that's a
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, basically my like approach to making it is probably not too dissimilar from like a brewer that was making a sour beer that's a blend of a bunch of different barrels, but instead of having all these different beers from different barrels and different ages, it's all about these tinctures that I make and kind of blending them together. So I have this like pretty big tincture library of all these different things, like anything I can think of or have read about or can get my hands on. I'll try to make a tincture out of it just as like kind of a different color in the palette. And
course.
I will do these really small scale like benchtop trials where I'm blending different botanicals into the wine. And one of the kind of things that just always stands out to me is like, because I'm building these spreadsheets to kind of keep track of what I've tried and make notes on every blend. And it's like let's just say I had like 10 botanicals that I was working with. If I start tweaking like just the ratios of each one, but not actually like add any new ones in or subtract any, it feels like every iteration is kind of like wildly different. A certain botanical will like be much more pronounced or be like totally lost. And so it's just so much like testing and trialing and dialing in and being like, hey, and I'm always kind of running it through this like mental checklist of like, does this smell really exciting? Like, does the smell make you want to drink it? And then then does it taste good? Does it taste complex? Is it balanced? Is it too
Right.
bitter? Is it too sweet? Is it too acidic? Is it too and
Yeah.
it's just like, sometimes it'll be like 20 iterations where I finally feel like, okay, I'm really happy with this. This is great. And then
Yeah.
I'll scale that up. And naturally, because of what I just said, of like any small tweaks to the ratios make a big difference. When like 100% of the time that I scale it up, it doesn't taste like what it tasted like
Bench
when
top,
I
yeah.
settled in on the formula, So then it's
Yeah.
like another bunch of tweaks on a bigger scale. And so
Do
it's
you feel like
just
it? I'm sorry, do you feel like it can be pretty forgiving? Like I'm just drawing on my experience in working with distillers because they can do just about anything, in terms of like how alcohol extracts, you can mix all kinds of ratios, you can back sweeten, you can keep
right.
things a lot more forgiving than beer might be. And if it all gets screwed up, they can just throw it through the still again and get the alcohol out and start over, you know?
Right. Yeah,
So
no,
there's
that's a good point for sure. I mean, I don't have a distillery, so I can't quite do that. Oh yeah, just redistill it thing like you mentioned. But it is a thing I think about so often when I'm messing with those products because obviously as brewers, we're trained so intently on cleanliness and process and
keeping
anybody
oxygen down and all these
yeah,
other
anybody that's ever
screw it
homebrewed
up. Yeah.
knows how easy it is to like have a beer go south on you. And
Yeah.
when you're working with distillate, it's like the medium is literally sanitizer. Like
Yeah.
you can't mess it up. So
Yeah.
it makes me kind of jealous of the distillers out there.
So you're mostly using a wine base, but do you feel like it's a bit more forgiving? Like if you scale it up and it's not, is there still wiggle room to continue to work with what you've scaled up?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I've kind of learned through the years that there's certain tinctures that I always make sure that I have available to me that I feel like are just kind of almost quintessential to like a vermouth or aromatized wine, and that's kind of like basically vanilla and citrus, mostly orange. And so
Mm,
it's like uh and anybody that is into cocktails kind of probably realizes that that putting that little like um orange peel on the rim of the glass is kind of can make any sort of cocktail like inviting to the
yeah.
nose.
Yeah.
It's just such a ubiquitously enjoyed aroma. And so like sometimes that can be a way to just kind of be like, okay, this is a little rough around the edges, but I could if I kind of use some of those like win button tinctures, then it's probably going to send it to a more enjoyable place. And then yeah, the back sweetening piece is definitely an element to it. I mean, I generally try my best to make these things be more on the dry side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the more experience you have with these things, the more you realize that like there's just sugar is such a critical part of the drinking experience of it. And some Amaro and vermouth can be like wildly sweet.
Oh
Uh,
God. Yeah.
and you kind of need that in some ways to balance like all the botanical element, all the bitterness. So yeah, if you adding more sugar generally will kind of make it a little bit more palatable, I guess. But my integrity wants me to always be like, what's the least amount of sugar I can put in this, but still make it be enjoyable and interesting and fun to like continue to drink.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Trying to find that balance point and not go over it for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so you just to expand a little bit more on it, you have a record label as well, yeah?
Yeah, I do.
Just in
Yeah,
case you weren't up to enough already with your
I
different.
know. What was I thinking?
And and I've noticed like so you do some of your releases are sort of paired music and beverage experience. Is that kind of right?
Yes, that is very right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, music is so important to me. It's such a source of inspiration. It's such a source of like stress relief for me. It's like it kind of regulates my body, and it's been important to me for so long. And so I've always kind of been like leaned on music in various ways for inspiration. I think anybody that, has seen Burial's labels for the beers, like, David Paul Seymour is our illustrator for Burial, has been for almost since the beginning, and I discovered him through music posters, mostly kind of like doom metal posters. And so the element of music has always kind of existed in the Burial world in various ways, but it in the last couple of years, it has kind of, like, I guess you could say, officially shifted into like a very real part of my professional life. And um, it started off with the record label, but really the record label kind of was starting around the time that Eulogy was under construction. And we really didn't get to talk too much about Eulogy as we were kind of going through my
Yeah.
all the venues, but Eulogy opened in November of last year, and it's right next door to our original location on the South Slope. And
Oh,
it's a it's a music venue that kind of pretty much exclusively has like burial and visuals products available at the bar. And a bunch of cocktails as well. But yeah, it was just something that, like, when we think so much about these immersive experiences, live music to us is kind of like one of the absolute ultimate immersive experiences. And so we really wanted to kind of bring that into our world, and that's been really exciting. But I had kind of I came up with this idea for visuals, to have a wine club, which a wine club is a really common thing in the wine world, of course. But most
sure.
of the wine clubs
Yeah.
that exist in the world that I know of, it's like maybe twice or four times a year you get offered like a half case of wine or a full case of wine, maybe get some special wines that the general public doesn't get. And then maybe there's like a meet the winemaker event a couple times a year, whatever. And that's kind of like the algorithm there for that. But I really wanted to loop back in this, immersive experience thing that we put so much focus on. And so my idea was to essentially just create this like take home experience where the wine
Yeah.
is just a part of the experience. And, you know, on a personal level, I think that I was definitely infusing a lot of the way I think about these like little moments that I make for myself when I'm opening a wine or a beer that I'm like really jazzed to try. I feel like I kind of create this little like ritual or a ceremony around the consumption of the wine. So a lot of times for me, that includes like putting on a record. It's like I
Yeah.
want to kind of like have all of my senses be engaged in this moment. And so I
That's
knew
yeah.
that I needed to have a music element to this like take home experience. And so, I thought a lot about like what that might look like. And of course, I probably could have done something as simple as, like make a little like playlist or something like that. But um, I guess you could say that I had this idea in the back of my head for a really long time that it would be, like, what would my retirement project be? And it was often like probably start a record label. And so it was this thing that I had kind of been like marinating on for many, many years and thinking what it would be like. And I kind of had this, well, I was trying to really infuse like this sense of place into the wine club, because without getting too off on a tangent, as of this moment, we make our wine, our grape wine in California. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so I really wanted to infuse a sense of place in the wine club, because we kind of lost that to some degree with the wine being made on the other side of the country. So I really wanted the music element to kind of celebrate what was going on in Asheville. And because because I just am who I am and have the passions that I have for music, and I've lived in this town for, coming up on 12 years now. I've just developed a lot of relationships with people that are making music here. And also, we're like really oddly fortunate that we have two synthesizer companies based in Asheville, Moog
Uh-huh.
and Make Noise. And so there's a lot of people making kind of like experimental, um, kind of ambient, I guess, for lack of a better word, music here. And with this experience, I didn't want to like force a certain type of music onto anybody necessarily. Like, hey, I'm really into metal. Like, you should listen to metal while you're drinking this wine. And that felt kind of like a little aggressive. And so I was like, it would make much more sense if the music element could be like kind of ambient-ish, like kind of creating a soundtrack, a score, if you will, to like the drinking experience. And so I reached out to a couple friends in town that make music in that vein. And I was like, hey, this is my vision. Would you be down to basically make, write and record music specifically for this project, as like the soundtrack to drinking this specific wine? And I got really good feedback on it. Like, most of these people that make super abstract music were kind of like, I would love the opportunity to have a
Yeah,
very succinct like
it's
purpose
much
for the music. Um, so yeah, that just kind of led to me like, okay, well, I should probably start a record label just to kind of like facilitate all this. And so, yeah, my label's called Ceremony of Seasons, and it basically exists specifically to facilitate the musical component of the Visuals Wine Club, with seasonal releases on the solstice and the equinox. And it's all Asheville-based musicians. So it's been really fun. It's been super joyful for me, to kind of, I don't know, create like a forum in a way for these musicians, um, to get to really know them on a much deeper level, to collaborate with them on the music, and to see their creative process. And then we always have like a release event where they perform. And that's another ancillary benefit of just working with all local musicians, is like they live here. It's really easy logistically to like get them to perform on the release. Um, so yeah, it's been really, really incredible.
So I'm really interested, Tim, in this idea of this immersive experience. It almost sounds like some of the installation art and things like that that I'm familiar with. And I guess I'm kind of curious how the music drives the beverage, or maybe you can talk about a specific example if you like, or how does one inspire the other, and like what how do you make a beverage that has that kind of a drone mood, or whatever kind of aesthetic that you're reacting to.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great question. It's something that my kind of thinking on it has evolved a bit the longer I've been doing this. I think when I first got into it, um, as much as I was super amped on like the enthusiasm that I was getting from the artists, it still kind of felt like a world that I didn't fully understand. And so I was trying to be as hands off as possible, and trying to be like, hey, like at the end of the day, the music is your art, and I don't want to get in the way of that. But like, you know, all I can really do is like give you a little bit of inspiration, or like essentially I'm like, all right, so this release that you're writing music for, it's going to be out on the summer solstice. So there needs to be ideally some sort of a like um, kind of seasonal inspiration to it. It should be something that feels kind of summery. And thankfully, all the artists have been open with me kind of like dictating the visual kind of
Mhm.
packaging of the release. Most of the time, it's been photographs that I've taken. During the season. So, for instance, a summer release would have like some sort of flower photo or something like that as the cover. And then with the wine part was a little bit challenging. So I was kind of basically telling them, I'm like, okay, so this release, the summer release is going to have like this Pinot Noir wine as that comes with the package. So um, in some cases, I would have the wine physically available to me at the time, but of course, most of the time I didn't, because you have to get so far ahead of this to, write and record and mix and master and press the music.
Yeah.
That I would have to be like, okay, well, this is what the wine is going to be like, and this is where it comes from, and this is what I expect it to taste like. And so, like, just try to think on that as you're making the music. But I think as I've gotten more and more into this, I've done it for a year and a half now. I'm getting a little bit more confident with kind of being able to pitch ideas, I guess, or to try to make it a little bit more cohesive. And sometimes the artists are responsive to that, and other times not. But I'm actually in the process currently of evolving the way that this works. So now I'm starting to do I'm basically like paring back the experience a bit to basically be just an aperitif wine and a cassette tape actually.
Yeah.
So trying to just like simplify it a little bit and make it so it can be literally more collaborative on the beverage side of things. So with a typical grape wine like Pinot, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, it's like, okay, this is the grape that's in it. It is what it is, right? But with an aperitif, it's like, well, we can make this thing be anything we want it to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's been a really fun process. I'm kind of like just starting to walk that path. The summer release that'll be out in June will be the first of that ilk. And so the musician was basically like, "Hey, I really love these types of botanicals, or like these botanicals make me think of summer. Can you incorporate those?" And so finding ways to really try to make the beverage be as collaborative and as feel as intentional as it's meant to be with the music.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds a lot more collaborative, like you're saying, and uh leaves you open to be a lot more responsive to you sort of start out in a general kind of way and just sort of really hone it in as it gets closer. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's been really incredible and I mean, just like in a similar way as when I got into making wine and cider from beer, like even though it's kind of an adjacent fermented beverage, there's just so much to learn and so much different philosophies that you can kind of then apply back to beer. And in this case, to like have this opportunity to kind of go through this other sort of very different creative process.
Yeah.
It kind of informs me in a lot of different ways, or it kind of changes my thinking on certain things, or it opens certain doors in my creative process that maybe wouldn't have been open otherwise. So kind
Can
of
you think of an example of how some of your stuff with some of your work with the with wine and aperitivo has made its way back into your beer?
well, certainly from the types of wines and ciders that we make are what you might call natural or native yeast fermented. And so that is obviously like basically it's very akin to spontaneous beer or mixed culture
Yeah.
brewing. And so I always found it quite fascinating, working in the cellar of a winery where it seems to be kind of business seems to be kind of cleaning protocol that they do this kind of like three step thing where they use what is essentially like a PBW cleaner. Then they rinse that with some kind of citric acid solution to basically counteract the pH, and then they use a normal kind of sanitizer like PAA, like we would use, and then they always rinse that with water after before they put wine
Mm.
in it. And the cleaning process almost in a lot of ways feels like so much laissez-faire compared to like
Yeah.
what we're used to in the brewery.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that a lot of those philosophies really just kind of got me thinking about like the why of doing these things, what you're actually achieving through your cleaning processes. And in some ways, as kind of like, you know, eh, I wouldn't apply this to clean beer, but to like in our mixed culture project at Burial, kind of uh, approaching it almost like with a little bit less intensity of from like a cleaning perspective, because it's kind of like, hey, the goal here is to kind of let like these microbes um, do their thing. And
Yeah.
so why are we like taking all these outrageous steps to like make sure we kill them every possible place? You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
Uh, so that's kind of like maybe the most direct thing that I've learned from that perspective.
Yeah. That's always interesting. Yeah, from my experience of my tenure brewing in Oregon, you definitely saw a lot of people that you saw that like that difference between like the people who are making wine down in the Willamette Valley versus the breweries that you'd see around town. And sometimes you get people from wineries applying at breweries and stuff. It's like you guys only clean stuff once a year. It's
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure I'm gonna
Um,
get shit for that, but I guess so being that it seems that you have like a really wide open palette that I really love and so many varieties of ways that you can express yourself in terms of what you want to bring in be it music or art or especially in all the flavors and things that you're building. I'm curious if either are there any what's your next frontier for what you want to explore? Are you pretty happy you go deeper here, or is there just something entirely different that you want to get into?
Oh man, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I feel like we always kind of have things on the horizon. We're always kind of trying to dabble in new things. I think that for me personally, well, so we recently have been putting a little bit more effort into kind of diversifying our non-alcoholic beverages, which is, of
Cool.
course, I'm sure it's a hot button item in in the beer industry. Everybody's kind of talking about this in various different ways. One of the things that we started doing recently that was something that was in my mind for a while that I wanted to do, and that we've kind of started dabbling in it is we have our own coffee line now. And the way we've kind of approached that is kind of through like a co-packer, I guess you could say, or like we partnered with somebody that we really admire in the coffee space to help us with the sourcing and the roasting and everything like that. So it's kind of like a private label thing, but coffee is something that I've been pretty passionate about for a while. And I think that I think that there's, or as we have these conversations about non-alcoholic beverages and being more inclusive and offering like craft made intentional products to people that maybe don't drink alcohol. Coffee is one that I feel like is the most akin to beer in the sense that it's a very social beverage. People go to coffee shops and hang out and meet with people and socialize while they consume. And that feels like an area that has some potential for us, as I loop that back onto this idea that kind of keeps coming up of the experience, like uh, the coffee shop is undeniably an experience. And I think that that is perhaps something, I mean, it's definitely something that we're talking about internally as like a potential future endeavor. We also have kind of started to dabble in THC beverages a little bit, which is pretty interesting. It's an interesting space just because like the regulations surrounding it is kind of in this weird undefined space right now. So we're kind of going into it knowing that it might not be something that we can do a year from now.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it is that's another space that's just it's interesting because like basically the way you infuse THC into a beverage is with this like emulsion that is more or less flavorless when you dilute it down into the beverage. So creating those beverages is kind of more like just creating like a non-alcoholic seltzer, and it just happens to have this like effect, experiential effect that's kind of lingering in there. But we never really dove into the seltzer game, just because well, for me, I can't speak for everybody at Burial, but for me, I always kind of struggled with seltzer and it just feeling kind of like a soulless beverage to me.
Uh,
It
yeah.
we're trying to find ways to use like real ingredients and like do interesting flavor combinations and make those products have just as much intention and integrity as anything else that we create.
Yeah.
So that's fun in a way. It's also just fun, like I've learned through getting into the wine industry that like um just the camaraderie of the beer industry is such a huge reason that drew me to it.
Yeah.
And that getting into that from like the wine perspective or the cider perspective, it's very similar, but it's just kind of like a different bubble that doesn't necessarily cross over with the beer world that often. And that kind of same thing exists in some ways with the coffee world or the THC world. And so just to kind of make connections and get to know the people that are crafting things in that world and trying to bring all these kind of different worlds together through camaraderie and collaboration is like super fun, super fulfilling. It's definitely like keeps me wanting to expand the worlds that we're expanding, because it's just like another way to kind of curate, I guess, which I get a lot of joy out of. So
Yeah. No, that's one thing I love about you is all the like really the enthusiasm and passion that you pour into all these different interests of yours and offering us all a glimpse into it. It's so cool. Uh,
thank you. It means a lot.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I could obviously go on talking with you about this forever, but unfortunately, I have to
Same.
wrap up. At one point, we'll have to make that happen sometime soon.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. No, absolutely. I hope we get the hang soon and get deeper into it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to see all the stuff you're up to, of course. But yeah, for now, I want to thank you very much for joining me today and sharing all your passions and all your projects. And I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vasily. Great
Thank
chatting with
you.
you. It was an
Great.
honor to be on this with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Um, Tim will be back on the next episode of this show as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That will be on the air in 2 weeks, so make sure you tune in for that. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media to support journalism in the beer space. Check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. I'm Vasilios Gletsos of Wonder Camera Beer Manufacturer, and thanks for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. First Tea invites you to explore the rich and versatile world of teas and botanicals, including instant black tea. Email info@firsttea, that's FIRSDTEA.com to find out more.
Ironheart Canning is the quality leader in mobile canning and much more. With a decade of packaging experience, Ironheart is your turnkey solution for all your canning needs. Are you looking for a unique can size or nitro dosing? Ironheart offers filling sizes from 6 ounce up to 19.2, dedicated equipment for mixed culture products, and nitro dosing capabilities for still beverages and beer. Looking to break into other beverage segments? Look no further. Ironheart also provides a robust network of co-packing solution to get a variety of beverages in cans, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic alike. Ironheart Canning. You have the capability because Ironheart can do it for you. Visit them at ironheartcanning.com or email info@ironheartcanning.com.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success at malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.